California, and I believe LA, who's kindly with us today, shared his experience, strength, and hope for 50 minutes. It's all yours, Ron.
Thank you so much, Bobby. Hello, everybody. My name is Ronald White. I'm an alcoholic and I'm also a cocaine addict. Um, I want to start off by thanking Terry for asking me to come out and share. Originally, when he asked me to come out and share, I told him I wasn't quite sure if I could do it today because it's my mother's birthday today, and at the time we didn't have anything planned, but I was pretty sure we were going to be doing something for her, and I wasn't quite sure if it would conflict with this meeting. But then after Ralph and I talked and we had decided on a dinner, I said, well, we can go ahead and we can come here. I could come here today and share with you guys. And what better place to share what Cocaine Anonymous has done with me than on the day of my mother's birth, the anniversary of my mother's birth, because that is the person that literally carried me through much of my disease. It's so funny how insulting. Let me back up a little bit. Let me do some of the niceties. Chris, I'm sorry. You should keep me straight, okay? I have a sobriety date. It's July the 14th of 1986. I have a home group. It's called the Never Too Early Big Book Workshop. We meet on the Zoom platform every Sunday morning, 9:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. It's a meeting that started in my mother's house, in her kitchen. She was kind enough to open up her doors to a bunch of alcoholics and addicts, about 13 of us at the time, sitting around her kitchen table, taking a walk through the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Started in November of 1987, and we've grown now a little bit. We have about 450 intimate friends that get together every Sunday morning to take a walk through this book that saved my life, Alcoholics Anonymous. Um, I have a sponsor. His name is Jerome Scott. He has a sponsor named Johnny Harris. I sponsor men and women in Alcoholics Anonymous. They are my salvation because oftentimes when I get crazy, they keep me centered because if nothing else, me talking to them, and I have regular times for them to call me and as inconvenient as it feels just before that phone rings, and I be thinking, damn, because I sponsor a lot of people who are out of the United States or on the East Coast, and I'm in the West Coast, so I schedule a lot of calls early in the morning. I get up at 4 every morning. Uh, Not necessarily for the calls. I get up at 4 every morning so that I can do my prayer and meditation, do some step 11 stuff. I have a series of prayer that my good friend Harold Long sends me, a whole list of readings, and I do that, sit in the dark and I read that and I listen to some soft music while I say some prayers and then I play some little games on my phone to get this old brain going. I'll let you guys know I turned 70 a month ago. Uh, and so I've been truly blessed by this fellowship, this amazing fellowship that has sustained me this long. And so when I say these things, when I recite to you the things that I do in the morning, that I'm not saying this to make it seem like I'm this big spiritual guru or that I have, because I remember I used to hear people say, I have a little garden that I sit in and I have a little bell that and I was thinking this, because they made me feel spiritually retarded when they said that, right? I'm thinking I don't do none of that shit, right? But what I do is what I do, and it's a practice. It didn't come immediately. I didn't do this from the jump. This developed for me. And what I found out is sometimes it feels mechanical. Sometimes it feels robotic. Sometimes I'm not really feeling it. But what I've done is I've trained my feet. What I've learned is willingness is one of the biggest things that keeps me sober. Just being willing to do things just now automatically. I don't even think about it. I get up, I set that alarm, and I get up and I go through all this. And who am I? Right? I'm a smoker, right? That's what I am. I'm a smoker. Now, I used to be up at 4 o'clock in the morning, but that's because I hadn't been to sleep, right? That's because I wasn't getting up. If anything, the mission was on. Why? My road dog, Ralph was my road dog. That's my running buddy out on the streets. And I can't tell you the number of times we were caught out walking the street trying to sell an old leather coat or trying to sell a car stereo that didn't even work, right? Just, because that's my disease. I've kind of jumped. I'm sorry, y'all. I kind of like jumped into it. Let me back up a little bit because since I have 50 minutes, and thank you for the time. I may not take it all. I probably will, but I may not take all the time. But let me explain some things about who Ron White is, and none of these things, uh, a lot of these things don't make me an alcoholic or a drug addict because they're the things that are endemic. I like Bill Clinton said, a lot of people have who aren't alcoholics are anxious. They have this, they are irritable, restless, discontent, but they're not alcoholics or drug addicts because they don't have that component that I do, which is when I drink, something happens to me physically that doesn't happen to a non-alcoholic or somebody who's not a drug addict. There's a compulsion that is so overwhelming that I must have another one. I don't think you heard me. I must have another one to the exclusion of morals, values, promises, loyalty, good sense. I mean, it excludes everything when I put one inside of me because I do the unexplainable. Again, I got ahead of myself. Let me go back. You see, I wonder if this is a function of getting older that you just, anyway. I'm musing now. Uh, I was born and raised in Los Angeles, California. I have five brothers. There's six boys in my family. My brother Will, our oldest brother, was born in Mississippi, where my mother was born. They came out to California. Will was born in 1949, so my mother came out to California. I think it was around 50 or 51, something like that. Um, and Ralph was born in 53. I was born in 54. Reggie was born in 56. Ricky was born in 57. And Rob was born in 59. So over a 10-year span, my mother had these six boys. And my father, whose name was Ralph, that's why we kind of got stuck on those R's when she met him out here in California. My father liked to drink wine. I don't know if what he drank was really wine. It was called Ripple. That's what he liked. I don't know if Ripple ever saw a grape. Ripple, it was with a twist top on it. Wasn't corked or nothing like that, nothing fancy. My daddy loved some Ripple, right? And 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 I used to believe, and I'm not quite sure. I know in the fellowship we say that only alcoholism and drug is a self-diagnosed illness that I have to, but I know that's the qualification for me to get sober. I need to, be able to concede that I'm an alcoholic. I don't know if my dad was an alcoholic or not. I know he had a drinking problem. I know that he would drink a lot. It would be he would have it around the house all the time. He smelled of it. I know that he'd get paid and he couldn't seem to make it home. That when he made it home, he was broke. He had all the hallmarks of what I come to believe alcoholism looked like. And so we called them winos back in the day. And I thought my dad was a wino. And my mother, when I was about 7, 8, 9 years old, my mother put him out of the house. Uh, they got, I don't know if it was when they got divorced or when, all I know is daddy got put out. And I remember I didn't like him when he was there because he seemed lazy and he seemed, uh, he never beat us. He never physically beat us, even though if you had read my first, second, or third inventories, you would have thought that because that was one of the resentments I had against him. It's amazing how self-delusion is so pervasive in me that I lie to myself to affirm a feeling or a belief. And because I built up this wall of resentment and hate against my father, I imagined he did things to me that he really didn't. My father was more, if he was abusive, it was more by neglect, if anything. But I could not see that at the time. I wanted to put some obvious things on him. And so I did this. I never resented my mother for putting him out. But my dad, didn't like him when he was there, and then I didn't like the fact that he wasn't there. You can't please me. This is some of the early hallmarks of alcoholism for me. I always want it all. I want everything both ways. And so as I come up, I'm a little guy. I'm 5'4.5", and I don't. That's right, a half, Terry. Don't give me all mine, right? So I'm a short guy. I'm a small guy too. I always have raised up very thin. I'm not so thin now. I wish I could get rid of some of this midriff, but I'm 70, so I might as well. Anyway, so I was real small, real thin. I couldn't play sports well. Ralph could, Will could, my oldest brother could. Reggie could play sports kind of well. Why am I'm the third oldest, but seem like I'm in here and I'm always playing second base or right field. Now, any guys who are, even if you're females and you understand baseball, you know that that's where you put the weak link. That's where you put the person who can't really field very well. And I was batted eighth or ninth in the lineup, right? Because I couldn't hit very well. I now, if you had looked at me externally as I grew up, you could never really know that these things bothered me so much because I present well. I put up a facade. I put up a wall of defense to make you think like it doesn't matter to me or it's not important. I have a pretty good sense of humor, so I deflect with humor. I can say a joke and I can do whatever to kind of back you off me to make you, and I'm very well read. One of the things that I was addicted to early on, me, Ralph, and Reggie always went to the library once and checked out the maximum number of books. We would come home, we would read each other's books. We just read voraciously, addictively. And reading that way gives you a great vocabulary. At least it gave me a great vocabulary. So I could use big words and stuff to back you off me, to make you feel like you're not quite as good as me, all the while feeling like I'm not quite as good as you. It's kind of been one of the functions of my thinking has always been that I've always felt like I'm special, but I've really felt like I'm not special. How is that even possible to have those same two feelings within the same, right? But that's the way that I've grown up, thinking I should be recognized, but also feeling like once I am, I'm not deserving of it. I've had some great things happen to me in my life. I've always been on the honor roll at school. I've always been scholastically very well adept, except I always had, here's the flip side. Ralph was always real good scholastically, and he's 1 year older than me chronologically. And so he was always in the classroom right ahead of me. Then when I would graduate to the next class, to the fifth grade or the sixth grade, Ralph had always been in the class that I went to, because you're in the same class with that last name. Anyway, I'm talking too much. And so I would go behind Ralph, and I was always, oh, you're Ralph White's brother, right? And they don't know. After a while, I started thinking that was my name. I'm Ralph White's brother, right? I didn't have my own identity. I see. This is all in my head. I'm sure that they didn't say it that way. It's like I said. I'm so delusional. It just feels like when something sticks with me that's all I hear. And so as I'm coming through school, I both the person I admired the most, Ralph had always been the person that I looked up to, that I admired the most, as also the person I started to resent because I don't feel like I'm quite as good as him, and I'm in his shadow. And so come up that way, that even when I achieve, I wonder, is it his residue or is it something of my own making? And as I come through school, getting awards, getting grades, I never wanted to be a bookworm. I wanted to be an athlete. I wanted to be a quarterback. I wanted somebody that had cheerleaders cheering for him, waving pom poms and doing all this. This is all pride and ego, y'all, that I want this attention because I was always, but nobody ever came in science class with pom pom. Yes, Ronald, that's the right answer, right? Nobody ever cheered for the science guy, for the academic guy. I'd always wanted to be written up in newspapers and the LA Times like these kids we grew up with, like Ozzie Smith and Eddie Murray and all these guys we went to school with that later became world-class athletes or entertainers. I've been with a lot of people, musicians and stuff. But you know something? Looking back on my life, I was written up in the newspaper. I they had these things for scholars and they would do, but they were always in those parts of the newspaper that I thought nobody looked at. That they were always in those things. Everything that I've always wanted, I've had, but I've always didn't have it the way I thought I should have it. It didn't have quite the kind of fanfare and the kind of applause and confetti and all that other kind of bullshit, right? So I've always been a person who is so selfish and so self-centered and so busy looking at yours, I can't appreciate mine. One of my sponsees, Inette, says I should always talk about the fact that when I was in high school, I danced on a dance show that had come out, that had become popular back in the 70s called Soul Train, right? Now usually I never talked about that before when I came, but she said, why don't you tell people about that? And I said, why about that? And then I found out that got one of the biggest reactions that I danced on Soul Train. But you know why I didn't talk about it? Because I wasn't one of the dancers they put in front of the stage. I was one of the dancers that danced behind the stage. And if you know anything about Soul Train, always the people. Now, mind you, I'm on Soul Train. I'm on TV, but I want to be the star. That's always been the story of my life. I can never see where I am because I'm always thinking about where I want to be. Anybody else like that? Yeah, see, because I'm the kind of person that always has looked at life as being half empty, not half full. That I am so busy, the grass always looks greener on the other side. Then it never seems like I could quite, or if I get what I'm looking for, that I get tired of it real fast. Or it doesn't quite have the shine that I thought it was going to have. See, that's the thing that they talk about in our book about expectations, right? When I put these expectations on things, it can never measure up to what I think it's going to be. Instead of me just letting shit happen. Just let it happen, Ronald, and just enjoy it for what it is. Instead of you think, oh, but it wasn't quite loud enough, right? When I played, I became a musician. When I was in junior high school, Ralph and I started playing instrument. Ralph played the baritone, and I played the trombone. Now, I was lucky enough. Ralph went to a high school that didn't have a music program. I went to a high school called Locke High School that had a very prestigious music program. So I got involved in every kind of band that I could get involved in. Marching band, symphonic band, orchestral band, jazz band. We had ensembles. We did everything. And band became my sport and I loved it. We went to competitions, we did all this kind of stuff, right? And I remember when I was in band, Ralph, remember how they used to, in order for you to be first chair, you had to challenge somebody. Right? You had to pick a little piece of music and you say, I'm going to challenge the first chair. And on a designated day, you both would play this little piece of music to see if you're going to take that person's chair. If you're going, I've always been second chair. This girl named Rachel Shivers. First it was Naomi Shivers, then it was Rachel Shivers. These girls could play the trombone better. And I mean, the Shivers were something else. They were great musicians. But I'm stuck at second. Mind you, there's a bunch of other people behind me, but I don't see that. All I can see is there's somebody in front of me. It's the story of my life with unrealized expectations. I'm at Locke High School, and I get accepted to go to college on a full academic scholarship. The college I got accepted to is a private college here in Los Angeles, in a suburban area of Los Angeles called Westchester. It's called Loyola Marymount University. At the time, it was Loyola University and Marymount College, a Catholic school run by the Jesuits. And I didn't know anything about Loyola. All I know is I wanted to go to UCLA. This is where Ralph went. Now, I told you I didn't follow him right successes, yet I want to follow behind him everywhere he goes. I told you, I'm all screwed up, right? But Ralph goes to UCLA, and we all grew up loving UCLA. So Ralph is at UCLA, and I applied to go to UCLA, and I get rejected. Now I find out later the reason I got rejected is they sent the wrong Ronald White's transcripts to UCLA. And so I had gotten rejected because they thought I didn't have good grades. And Ralph suggested, why don't you apply to this school called Loyola, right? Because he had applied to it, and it was like one of his. I'm looking at it like it's one of his rejects, right? Ralph said you should go there because it's a smaller class size and stuff. He's at a school where they have classes in these auditoriums with hundreds of students and stuff. He said, go to Royal. So I grudgingly apply and I get accepted on a full academic scholarship. Now here I am, a little kid from the hood, that as a Baptist, I'm a Southern Baptist is how I was raised. I don't know nothing about Catholicism. I ain't never even been in a Catholic church. And here these Catholics are accepting me in their private school on a free ticket, fully paid. Man, and I'm resentful about it, right? Best thing that ever happened to me, I find in retrospect. The summer before I start Loyola is when I took my first drink. All that while I've had all this crazy thinking, all this stuff like this, I've never drank anything because of my dad, because not wanting to become like him. When I graduate from high school, uh, I decide I'm tired of being a nerd, tired of being socially awkward, tired of being, now mind you, I told you all this stuff I was accomplishing while I was in, but I still don't feel like I'm enough because I've never slept with a girl. I've never had sex. I've never, I've impregnated many a pair of jeans. Wait, I don't think I was supposed to share that. That's I think that's a little too much information. Anyway, anyway, uh, so uh, so I start to drink because I want to be able to get together with when I started to drink, it freed me. The feeling that alcohol gave me was a sense of, we read the 9-step promises at many meetings. And what I've come to learn is when I read those promises, that is what I felt in the beginning. When I first started to drink, I felt a new freedom and a new happiness. I didn't wish to shut the door on the past, nor regret. I didn't do, everything that it talked about is the feeling that I got from alcohol. It worked so well, and I only drank at the parties and stuff in my freshman year in college because I was very dedicated to my studies. After freshman year, I almost quit college to go on the road with a band I joined at a club in LA called Mavericks Flats. There was a friend of mine named Danny LaMelle. Danny ended up playing with Rick James later, but at the time, Danny was in a group and he brought me in as the trombonist in the summer between first and second year. And I almost quit college to go on tour to Europe with this band, but they fired me. They let me go. And I've always thought everybody in the band was kind of light skinned and tall and all this other kind of stuff. And I thought, I'm too short and I'm too dark. That's why they let me go. Another resentment that I carried around with me. I didn't know God was doing for me what I couldn't do for myself. And I stayed in school. And I started, but the experience that I had with Danny is in behind that club one summer I started smoking weed for the first time. And when I started smoking weed, man, I love me some. I can't tell you how much I love smoking weed. We would, oh my God, I would be able to smell it through the bag at 20 paces, tell you if it had seeds or stems, where it came from, where it was grown, all it, man, I love me some. Anyway, I digress. So now I'm smoking weed and I'm drinking. Uh, But now, progressive disease, y'all. Even though I had started off drinking only on the weekends, and you need to know that when I drank alcoholically. But I might, like most people who are periodics, they don't think they have a problem because I have these periods when I'm not drinking, forgetting what I'm doing when I am drinking. But now I want to feel good on Monday and on Thursday. So now, second year, I start drinking daily. Third year of college hits, I've started adding all kinds of substances now. The hash oil, Thai stick, angel dust, everything but the hard stuff. I just said angel dust, and I'm going to say everything but the hard stuff, right? Everything except cocaine and heroin. Those are off limits. Those are verboten. Those are, I'm not doing none of that stuff. But now my grades start to slip when I'm doing all this getting loaded, right? And you would think, because I have aspirations to go to law school, because there was a guy I aspired to be like that I looked at on TV when I was so addicted to TV named Perry Mason. And I wanted to be like Perry Mason. I wanted to be a lawyer. Now, as I come through school, um, my grades start to slip, and I know this won't do because I want to go to law school and I have to have good transcripts to go to law school. And so you would think that I would just simply stop this foolishness. I would cut out this drinking and using during the week, and I would just buckle down and I would sleep. But instead, what I cut down on were my morals, and I cut down on my values, and I started to become a liar and a cheat. I started plagiarizing my term papers. Hell, I started buying term papers from these services that used to sell them. Now, this is the straight A guy. This is the nerd. This is the guy who never cut any corners anytime. And now I start to, and it's funny, when I started becoming a liar and a cheat, I wasn't feeling, I may have felt a little guilty about it in the beginning, but my head has this justifier that says it's the professors that are the problems, not my morals. They're just too unreasonable. I know I'm smart. Why do they have all these, I can do, and I start to justify my behavior because alcohol and drugs can't be the problem. They're the things that freed me. Life must be the problem now. And so somewhere in that third year of college, I crossed what we in Cocaine Anonymous call the invisible line, where it ceased being a luxury and it became a necessity. When I couldn't do without it, I couldn't go anywhere without getting high. I couldn't do anything without having joints or having something with me. And somehow, I was blessed. God did it for me because I graduated from college on time with good enough transcripts and good enough grades. And I took the LSAT and my score was good enough and I get accepted to go to law school at a law school in San Francisco called Hastings College of the Law. When I went to Hastings, it was one of the most prestigious law schools in the nation. That's not why I went there. I went there because I knew if I stayed in California, in Los Angeles, that those long-throated brothers of mine who I was getting loaded with all the way through school would drag me down and I would have to drop out of. So I had to get away from them. So I run to San Francisco. Unfortunately, I took one brother there with me. I shouldn't have. Me. Because my disease blossomed when I was in law school. The summer before I started law school, something about those summers. The summer before I started law school, I started snorting a white powdery substance. That's the way they describe it in police reports. A white powdery substance resembling cocaine. And when I started snorting cocaine, I thought it was the drug of the beautiful people. We would buy it, man. Me and my brothers would buy it. That summer before I started law school is when we really delved into it. I went with a girl in college named Joy White, and Joy's brother Leslie. He was our connect. He was our he because you had to know somebody to get cocaine back in the day. Well, you couldn't get it out on the streets. You had to buy at least a gram or something, right? And we would piece together, and then we would go over my brother Will's apartment. We'd sit around, and it'd be on the album cover, and it would. Oh, jazz is a little young. Jazz album are these. Anyway, it's too young to. It's too takes too much explanation. We would have album covers, and everybody would have their own little pile, right? And then we would say, "Oh no, it's not my turn. It's your turn." And we had Coke etiquette. You could go to the bathroom and come back, and your shit wasn't touched. It was the early days, right? It was. I love the lifestyle. I love everything about it. When I was introduced to cocaine, man, it did everything that every other substance I had used times 10. And I literally sped my way through law school. I was in San Francisco. I'm a black kid up there, being clerking for a black lawyer who was just like me. He taught me, Ronald, he said, in this law firm, what we do is we work hard and we play hard. And that was right up my alley. He taught me how to do law during the day, and at night we party. And I did that all the way through law school. My brothers would send money up to me to transport the package down. Thank God they didn't have TSA in those days. Oh, good Lord have mercy. Because I was smuggling right, Tina? Right? I was smuggling all kind of stuff. Anyway, I think the statute of limitations is passed. I think I can talk about this freely. In any event. So I go to summer school after second year of law school. I graduate from law school early in 2.5 years. The accelerated degree program. I'm the first one to get out of law school earlier than any of my classmates. They have a test you got to take to be a lawyer called the bar exam. They're giving one February before my graduation in May. I take the test. The results come out on the same day as my graduation. And I learn before I even walk across the stage that I've passed the bar. And at age 24, I become one of the youngest black attorneys licensed to practice law in the state of California. And I know I'm a genius. I know I'm a boy wonder. I know I'm going to be a millionaire by the time I'm 30. I'm going to be the next Perry Mason. Isn't it true? Right? I'm going to do all that. By the time I was 30, I was homeless. Now, I wasn't on the streets homeless. I was at my mama's house homeless, right? Now, for men and this women too, if you're grown, living with your mama, not paying rent, not being useful, not doing anything, you're homeless, right? That's her house. That ain't yours, right? You know. Now, and so I don't have enough time to explain to you the things that I got and that I lost as a result of alcoholism and drug addiction. Because the summer after I got out of law school, I started hitting the pipe. For those of you who don't know, that means I was smoking cocaine. And back in my day, it wasn't called crack, it was called freebasing. I don't know why they called it freebasing. They should have called it broke basing. Oh, there's my mother. Mama, you could watch out. I'm going to say some spicy words there. So happy birthday. Happy birthday, mama. Anyway, uh, so y'all got a chance to see my mama. All right, so I'm freebasing now, and I'm back in L.A. now. I've come back to L.A. and I'm with my brothers again, and we're partying hardy, and I'm getting jobs with law firms, and I'm abandoning jobs with law firms before they would find out who exactly I am because I'm a smoker now. And when you start to smoke, you start losing things quickly. And because I'm smart, I get stuff too. And I get stuff and I lose stuff. I remember in 1984, I worked for the Olympic Committee here in Los Angeles, a personnel coordinator. I had free tickets to every Olympic event. And I love the Olympics, boxing, gymnastics, track and field, all my favorites. I have yet to see one event because I stole $800 from the Olympic Committee to smoke. And I was too paranoid to go back to the job because I thought they might find out. And so I never saw any events. See, that's what smoking, that's what cocaine took from me. But that wasn't enough to stop me. I smoked another 2 years. You see, uh, the worst part of my illness isn't the what happens to me when I smoke. It's what happens to me up here that propels me to smoke. I have an obsession. An obsession is a persistent preoccupation with an often unreasonable and disturbing idea, thought, or feeling. What's the unreasonable idea, thought, or feeling that I have that is persistent, that I can smoke successfully, that I can control and enjoy, and I can't? How do I know that from my experience? The book says if hundreds of experiences have shown you that even one means another debacle with all the attendant suffering and humiliation, why is it that he is that one? Why can't he have the same kind of defense that one gets from touching a hot stove? Because my head tells me it ain't going to be that hot. or it tells me, I like to call my disease the gorilla. That's kind of like what we termed the gorilla. And the gorilla has tapped me out so many times. And Terry, I can't tell you how many times after a little couple of days of rest, my head tells me, you can take him. Right? My head says he wasn't that tough, right? You can get him this time. Until July the 13th occurred of 1986, when a guy stole some drug money from, who lived a few doors down from that lady you saw standing next to Ralph just a couple of minutes ago. Um, I stole some money from him, and he was rather dangerous. And with my cowardly self, I take him in my mother's house to explain to him that I don't have his money. And he seems quite reasonable. He says, Ronnie, we can make payment plan up. Why don't we just step outside? Now, mind you, this wasn't the first time my life had been threatened. I've had guns in my mouth. I remember getting a couple of ounces from this guy named Humphrey, and we smoked up all his dope. And then he put a gun in my mouth, and he said, I should blow your fucking head off. And then I said, I'm sorry. And then he had this look of disgust that came over his face, and he says, you ain't even worth the bullet. And as he pulled the gun out my mouth and turned to walk away, I said, if you just front me another, the taste of the gun fresh in my mouth. See, that's the nature of my illness. On this day, on July the 13th of 1986, this guy didn't have a gun, so I thought, I was rather safe. We step out on the porch to discuss credit arrangements, and he hit me so hard I felt like I was separated from my body. And he started to stomp me in my mother's front yard, and my mother stepped on the porch, and she watched this happen, and she said nothing to stop it. And she walked back in the house. And as she walked back in the house and closed that door, I had a moment of clarity. Now, little did I know my mother was sitting on the couch in the house watching the rest of this beating from her couch. And I used to say to myself, oh, that was cold of her to, and how me, the person whom my mother used to sit bedside in hospitals when I would have asthma attacks. My mother who would hold my hand in the dark to let me know I wasn't alone. And I'm the one causing her to suffer from my actions. Thank God that God doesn't make misery comfortable. And that beating quieted the committee down long enough for me to go to a recovery home the next day. And the miracle of it is I didn't leave the recovery home. Grace was given to me, that I was given enough measure of grace, unmerited favor from the God of my understanding, that I was able to stay in that place called the Harbor Light Center, located on Skid Row in Los Angeles at that time. They had a meeting, an H&I group of Alcoholics Anonymous that brought in a Friday night meeting. And when I went to this meeting and I heard them share, I fell in love with the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. At the time, this was 1986, and Cocaine Anonymous, I think, had just been birthed in 1985. I didn't know very much about Cocaine Anonymous. Our home group was an Alcoholics Anonymous group, but around our second year in recovery, Cocaine Anonymous became very popular in Los Angeles. And while we attended both Alcoholics Anonymous and Cocaine Anonymous, much of my service has been over the years in Cocaine Anonymous, serving on committees and conventions and the like, because it's in the rooms of Cocaine Anonymous that I can get the opportunity to share all of my story. I love Alcoholics Anonymous. I just feel sometimes held back by sharing my entire story. But because I respect the house that I'm in, I respect the traditions. And so I'm not going to step on the traditions. I know I am. But we have a fellowship where I can share all this. And so I love Cocaine Anonymous. Um, and I throw myself into the conventions, the dances, the picnics, and a lot of times around between years 10 and 15, I remember I got so arrogant in the fellowship that I'm looking down at people that are going to these, that's not the fellowship. It's in the book, right? That's the unity part of the fellowship. That's one of our legacies. And that is the thing that saved me long enough to get me to the book. I needed to know that I could live sober and have fun. I remember early on, man, I would go with my, I just met, let's see, in 1989, I met who was going to later become my wife. And Terrence, who was her daughter, who became my daughter, we would go to the picnics. And then she had our son, Ronnie, in 1991. And we would go to the conventions and we would take our children with us. And it was a whole family affair. And I need to let you know, man, that this thing is more than just not drinking and not using. It is much more than in our book, the way that it's phrased is the man who thinks that sobriety is enough simply is not thinking. Now, that part of the book is in step 9 because it's saying that the person who has toe up everything around them, and when I get sober, if I think just being sober is going to be an amends to all the people I have so shockingly treated, then they just don't know. I have to go about and amend the harm that I did. I remember the first amends that I made to my mother. When I made an amends to my mother, I sat down with Mama and I told her, Mama, I know I've stolen so much money over the years. I didn't say stole, but I said I've taken so much money from you over the years that I can't even calculate it. I said, what I propose to do is I want to pay you $200 a month for the next 2 years. I said, I know that probably won't even scratch it, but that's what I can do. And my mother said, no, son, I'm just so proud of you that you're sober. That's good enough. And internally, I said, whew, right? But I was raised by some big book ninjas. They told me that that wasn't good enough. I had to say this to my mother, and I said it in a language that she could understand. I said, Mama, I need to give you this money because I'm trying to get a better relationship with God. Now, my mother understands that. She understood the way that I put it then, and she said, okay. And for the next 2 years, every month, I sat with my mother in her house, and I gave her that payment. uh, Unintended benefits, unintended consequences. And Alcoholics Anonymous contains so many that when I came every month, I didn't just repay her that money, I repaid some of that trust I had stolen from her, that I repaid some of that time that I had taken from her over the years. Because how can you repay that? In this fellowship, in Cocaine Anonymous, we find a way. And so that was one of those things, one of those miracles that took place for me inside of this fellowship. When I was 88 days sober, I get a call in this part of uh, the Harbor Light Center called Primary. Now, Primary is where they put all the new guys to detox and where you do nothing but eat and sleep for a week before they release you into, I almost want to call it gym pop. It wasn't a prison, but with all the other guys. And I get a call in Primary where I was one of the people that it was assigned. They give you duties where you could make a couple of dollars a week. And I'm working in Primary and somebody tells me, Ronnie, there's a guy on the phone that says he's your brother. And so I get on the phone and it's Ralph. And Ralph's saying, hey, man, Ronnie, can you get me a bed there, man? And I'm excited. Oh, yeah. I think I got pulled, right? I think I got juice. I hadn't even checked with nobody, but I said, yeah, I can do it, right? And so that was a Friday, I think. And we don't let people in on the weekend, so he had to come on Monday. And when Ralph came, I need to let you know something because it's so funny how we see ourselves in the fellowship. And when Ralph came and he came in the kitchen, I'm sitting in the kitchen eating with some of the guys who've been around for a while. Those of us around 90 days, we think we're veterans. And there's this line of guys that come through from Primary to eat. And when I saw my brother, I almost cried. Now, the reason I almost cried because of how he looked, and it hurt me so bad to see the guy that I had admired so much what the disease had done. Now, mind you, I told you, I'm his running buddy. I'm out there in the streets with him. We have done more, we have been in more motels together. I shouldn't tell his story, but we'd have been in more motels together. We'd have been in more jackpots together. We'd have been in so many different things. But when you get out of the, it's so funny how you perceive things so differently. And when I look at him, man, I cry. And I felt a mixture of pain and almost shame when I saw him, because this is my brother and this is the guy that I grew up admiring and stuff. And I can't tell you, see what God does. I look at my brother today. My brother is still probably the person I admire most in life, aside from my mother, of course, my mom, who when you can see what God can do, the restoration that God can do. Reggie came in shortly after that. Rod came in on Christmas of the following year, 1987. Ralph picked up Rod on Skid Row to come to my mother's house for Christmas, and Rod looked so bad he was unrecognizable. When I see Rod today, see, I have absolutely no doubts of the power of God, the power that can occur in this program. We thought we had lost Reggie. Reggie went out after my niece, his daughter, Angie, died. Angie was about 5 years old. And when Angie died, it broke him. Now, it broke our hearts, but it broke him. And when he relapsed, we thought he could never make it back. He had been in and out, and I got to suffer all the stuff that my mother probably felt, a portion of what my mother suffered. And I remember I would give Reggie money. I hear people say, you gonna be enabling, don't do all that. I couldn't even refuse him. When he would ask me for something, man, I would just give it because I wanted him to know that he was still loved and that he wasn't forgotten. And he milked that. Reggie milked that, right? And I'm glad because it always takes everything that it takes, man. And Reggie is back, man, and Reggie's on fire. Right? And again, I know what God can do. Um, my life has been eternally blessed. I have a wife, two children, four grandchildren. I never knew if I made a list of the things that I wanted in Cocaine Anonymous in the beginning, Papa would not have made the list. When I hear those grandkids call me Papa, I can't. My heart melts. Everything's not all peaches and cream and Cocaine Anonymous. I got about 2.5 minutes left. I'm going to use it with this. 10 years ago, I sat in the parking lot of my law office. I had become a public defender for 12 years, and I had my own law office for 14 years. Uh, and I'm sitting in the parking lot of my law office contemplating suicide because I'm reading a letter from the state bar telling me of their intent to disbar me because of my representation of a client who had embezzled $1 million from some investors. Because the investors had sent him the money through my trust account, I had the responsibility of watching his business and making sure he used the funds properly, and I didn't watch him. I trusted him. I got lazy, and I didn't do my job, and as a consequence, I'm losing my profession. And I can't tell you the fear that gripped me as I read that letter, and the shame and the guilt and all the feelings that washed over me that day made me want to not ever have to see anybody again in this life. Because the same thing we tried to face and be rid of when we arrived in Cocaine Anonymous, the same thing that was choking me that afternoon, which was pride and ego. Because stay around here long enough and let people tell you they love you and that they admire you and they respect you. And the same things we try to smash grow back. And now, because I so care about what you think about me, I'm about to kill myself because I think I'm going to lose it. And I can't tell you which thing it was that got me through that dark moment. In Bill's story, Bill says, for if an alcoholic failed to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life, through work and self-sacrifice for others, he could not survive the certain trials and low spots ahead. And I don't know which person it was I might have sponsored over the years, which fifth step I listened to. which hug it was I gave somebody to console them at a funeral. I don't know which person it was I gave a ride home to, which coffee pot it was I brewed, which a platter of fruit I cut up for our workshop over the years. I don't know which sober act it was that I had done over the years that allowed me to stay connected enough to the power that I made it home, and my wife did not reject me. Instead, she hugged me and said, "Honey, I don't know what's going to happen, but we're going to be okay." And when I told my mother cried. My mother said, "God's got you." And I called my big sister, Polly Pistol, and I told her, she says, "Ronnie," she said, "there may be some people in the fellowship that talk about you, but the ones who matter won't." And then uh, I had to go to a conference with Ralph 3 days after I wanted to kill myself. The Music City Roundup in Nashville, Tennessee. Ralph and I didn't want to get on that plane because I knew I was going to have to talk about what I had just lost and how embarrassed and ashamed I was. Things had not turned around for me. This was fresh. We got on that plane because my feet are trained and I honor my commitments no matter what. And I walked through that shame and took that plane to Nashville, and Ralph and I are sitting at breakfast with Kent Coleman and Steve Lee. And I'm telling them what had happened, and I start to cry, and all them start to cry. And I'd say, "I'm so sorry that I've let you guys down. I'm so sorry that I've let the fellowship down, that everybody's looked up to me and what have you." And they try to console me by telling me stories of when they had fallen and when they had been able to get through it. And I actually got to see Ralph do it physically, sit here just years before I saw him walk through some stuff. And Steve tells me some, and Kent tells me some stuff. But our shit always seems so much worse than anybody else. And I'm saying, "But you don't understand." Right? I said, "Who'd ever want me to speak again at a meeting?" I said, "The best thing I'd done was get my law license back. Who's ever going to want me to share again?" And one of them looked at me, I think it was Kent. One of them said, "Ronnie, are you crazy? Don't you know in our fellowship, the more you fuck up your life, the more we want to hear your story?" And they said, "Not because you messed it up, but what we want to know is, how did you not drink through that? How were you able to get through the darkest moment in your life and not get loaded?" And I'm here to share you that it is only by his grace, only by the grace of a merciful and loving God, that I'm able to sit here before you this afternoon, telling you the message that it is God that has carried me through. That God and all of his angels, all of you, my wife, my family, all of you in the fellowship that carried me through unemployment for 2 years until I could get a little piece of a job on Skid Row. And that little piece of a job helped me become humble again, working with the homeless. And that job led to another job at a treatment center where I now work at 2 detoxes and work with a lot of people who are struggling to stay sober. And I'm able to share my experiences with these individuals. That my life now is more bountiful and more fruitful and more meaningful than it's ever been at any point in time in my life. I'm not just saying that, it is true. That's Cocaine Anonymous. Terry, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to time travel today to share with you the miracle that is this fellowship, and let anybody within the sound of my voice know that God can do it. God can do anything but fail. My name is Ronald White. I'm an addict. Thank you so much for letting me share.
Hey, Ronald, thank you so much. That was awesome. I'm